Sometimes conflicting threats from President Trump and his advisors. As we said, this sent the Asian markets down. You can see 4% in Japan. That's a lot. U.S. stock futures have been down this morning. You can take a look right there with the NASDAQ down more than a point, the S&P down nearly a point. And this comes after a huge 700-point drop on Friday. So the president has said this new 25% hike on all cars and car parts imported into the United States will take effect starting Wednesday. He also said he, quote, couldn't care less if foreign car prices go up. We're going to get to the White House. CNN's Kevin Liptak in there, and that's not all that he and his advisors are saying on tariffs. And I got to say, sometimes, Kevin, the messages conflict with each other.
A lot of the times the message is conflicting, including President Trump with President Trump. You know, he has been promising these reciprocal tariffs for 6 weeks, but 2 days before they're set to go into effect, it is very unclear what exactly the president will be doing. And behind the scenes, there is this intensive work underway, really aides scrambling to try and finalize the details of what the president calls Liberation Day, these reciprocal tariffs. Just last night on Air Force One, you heard a couple of different things coming out of President Trump. He said that these tariff rates would potentially be more generous than what many people have been expecting, but he also saying that this would apply essentially to every partner of the US's when it comes to trade. Listen to what the president said.
How many countries will be in that initial tranche?
You'd start with all countries, so let's see what happens. There are many countries.
Russia.
I haven't heard a rumor about 15 countries, 10 or 15.
So you're starting with all countries?
Well, essentially, all of the countries that we're talking about. I wouldn't be talking about all countries. It's not a cutoff.
So what the debate appears to be right now is whether to apply individualized tariff rates on the U.S. trading partners, essentially dollar for dollar tariffs. That's something that the president has promised. Or does the president apply a universal rate, perhaps as much as 20% on all countries that the U.S. does business with? That's something that the president promised on the campaign trail. What he is planning to do isn't explicitly clear, and that uncertainty is part of what is lending so many jitters to the financial markets this morning. One thing that these tariffs will do in the eyes of the president's advisors is raise a lot of revenue. We heard Peter Navarro over the weekend say it could be as much as $6 trillion over the course of the decade. That could be used potentially to offset the tax cuts that the president wants to sign. And so at the end of the day, what economists say is that Americans will pay the costs of these tariffs no matter what form exactly they take, John.
Kevin, you did a great job explaining that, and I like how you put it. Sometimes it has been Trump versus Trump on tariffs, how he says they will go into effect. Thank you so much, Kevin. With us now, Brian Barnett. He is the Republican mayor of Rochester Hills, Michigan, which is a kind of a suburb of Detroit. It's also like, you can practically see Canada from Rochester Hills. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us. It's hard to know exactly what tariffs are going to go into place on April 2nd, as the president promised. But let's say it is 25% on all cars and car parts. What would the impact be on you in Rochester Hills?
Well, first, thanks for having me. It would be really a perfect storm. In Southeast Michigan, our biggest trading partners are Canada and Mexico, and our biggest industry is the mobility industry. So much of what we do in Southeast Michigan is tied to that industry, and every vehicle has parts made in Canada and Mexico. So it would be devastating. And, part of it, as you just shared, is the uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty as we enter this week where so much is supposed to happen. I think industries are really paralyzed to try to understand how to move forward.
How can you plan for this? I mean, what are you planning for?
Well, I've been talking to a lot of my businesses, my business community, to try to find out what they're doing. And I mean, the scenario is pretty simple. At least what most people think is, higher tariffs lead to higher cost leads to lower demand leads to lower production. And ultimately, that's where it becomes a mayor's issue. Lower production and lower demand means job loss. And that really is a significant issue. We've gone through really challenging times in Southeast Michigan before. And I'm not sure, these are just negotiation tactics. I hope the president and his team are able to move quickly. I was pleased that he had a very positive meeting with the prime minister at the end of last week. But the uncertainty, you see the markets reacting to it. it's daunting. It's impossible to prepare.
You think this could lead to job losses in Rochester Hills?
I think it could very quickly. I think most of the folks I'm talking to say, they can survive this kind of back and forth for about maybe 30 days. They've been preparing to try to have supply here, to try to handle supply chains. But if this is something that we're waiting for jobs to repatriate back to the United States, we know that takes, that's a great and wonderful plan. We're all supportive of that. But that can take 24 to 36 months. And most companies wouldn't be operating at the same levels they are now if you have this tariff environment for 2 or 3 years. It simply couldn't be the same.
Yeah, talk to me more about that, because the president does say his goal here is to get manufacturing back to the U.S.
Yeah, I think that's certainly. We're the manufacturing capital of our country, and it's our bread and butter. We would love to see that, but maybe these negotiations and tariffs can talk about some sort of graduated approach that people have 6 months or 12 months or 18 months to show progress to do that. But to hit tariffs right out of the gate, again, you see the markets reacting, the volatility, the uncertainty. If you're a business owner, if you're, want to repatriate jobs back to the United States, and it's a 2 to 3 year process, how confident are you right now that this current environment is going to be the same environment 2 to 3 years from now? You have to make billions of dollars decisions. So it's really a challenging position for most business owners, and ultimately business owners means, the rank and file, the union members.
One of the things the president said over the weekend was that he couldn't care less if foreign car prices went up. What do you think of that, and how would that affect you?
Well, the definition of foreign cars is pretty unique. Almost every American vehicle has parts that are assembled in Mexico, produced in Canada. They say a vehicle goes across the border, at least here in Michigan, 6 to 8 times before it's actually produced. And those are the traditional sort of Detroit Big Three that we would consider American-made cars. So I understand the president's comments, but when you get down into what percentage of parts in an American-made car are built and produced and manufactured either in Canada or Mexico, it's a really high number, which means those tariffs are going to impact the kind of big three autos, the big three Detroit manufacturers that we all think are local.
What are you hearing from voters on this? I know you're very busy doing your job, governing and governance, but what are voters saying about this, and could this have a political impact?
Well, I think, obviously everything could have a political impact. I know that President Trump cares a lot about Michigan. He was here a lot in advance of the elections, the state that supported him. I know he cares about the auto industry. And I think people are just nervous because there's so much uncertainty. Again, just looking at your reporting, every 24 hours, the countries, the amounts, the days it starts and stops, just start and stop, for end users. And that makes it so difficult. It makes it difficult for capital. It makes it difficult for long-term planning. It makes it difficult for local officials to try to understand how we can support. My job right now is to just keep sharing the stories of my community, of Rochester Hills, and how I think it will impact our community, and hope that the president will take that into account as we make decisions.
Mayor Brian Burnett, you're going to have an interesting week. I do appreciate you taking a second to talk to us this morning. Good luck.